Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today, again, I have my coworker Killian here, who's going to help us dive into some of the hacking conferences you may not have heard of. Hello, Killian.
Hey, Cody, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. So last time we talked about some of the really big conferences that pretty much everybody has heard of. That's, DEF CON, RSA, Black Hat. But today we're going to take it a step further and talk about some of the conferences you might not have heard of. Some of the conferences that are local or regional or otherwise just a little bit more niche, but still offer a bunch of great stuff that you might be interested in. So I have a really big list of conferences we're going to go through today, but before we do that, I also want to touch back on some things we talked about last time when we actually had someone in the chat of the live stream who was the first person who introduced me to really a lot of the great things behind DEF CON. So during our last live stream, we actually had Jonathan, the creator of the Florida Man badge, a former DEF CON goon, which is a security volunteer, and also a very active member of the badge life community, who's jumping into the chat and providing us with some additional details and insight into what it's like to get into one of these conferences. And towards the end, we had some suggestions from him and others about ways to get into these conferences for free if the price tag is something that's been putting you off. There's lots of different ways to get involved. As Killian mentioned, sometimes you can get sponsored by a brand to actually go to the conference if you're interested about learning different skills or getting to go through the vendor area. And you can also volunteer at the conference if you want to be part of the community and you want to get a little closer to the organization and the actual planning that happens to actually make these things real conferences that are able to occur. Because there's a lot of logistics that go on and there's a lot of logistical failures that happen. I remember the first year that I went to DEF CON, there were no badges. Everything was just like a rubber, it was kind of like a coaster because there had been some manufacturing problem and they weren't able to get them all done. So this is a just gargantuan effort both in planning, booking, organizing, manufacturing hardware, doing logistics. It's really a big operation and they can use lots and lots of help. So if you're interested, not just in conferences, but getting involved in the hacker community, volunteering to be a goon at DEF CON or a helper at another conference can be a great way to get started. Because if you don't know anyone, it certainly helps to have a big project to work on together to have an excuse to just talk to a bunch of new people. So highly recommend that if you guys are interested. But we had some also questions about the badges that happen at DEF CON because the badge life community is a very special, very interesting community that's a crossover between hardware hackers and software hackers. So Killian, have you ever managed to score like a hardware badge from a conference?
No, in all of my years going to them, I've always seen people with these awesome badges, and you showed some last time. And, they'd light up and they do all sorts of stuff, but I had no idea about the culture around it. I thought it was just a cool trinket. I mean, I've probably thrown out 1,000 or more of the silly plastic ones that I've gotten over the years. But I've never gotten one of those really cool ones that you were talking about. So that's something, well, we'll see if I ever can at this point.
Oh boy. So fortunately, there's a lot of different groups out there that choose to make these badges before going to conferences. And what's cool about that is you don't need to be some big group with tons of resources. There was a group of people, I think they're the Lonely Hacker Club, that just had some lady make like 100 of these badges that were super simple printed circuit boards. She sunk her own money to it and then she sold them at the conference. There's even school groups, like small cybersecurity school groups who will make these really, frankly, kind of crappy badges that are just like super funny. Sometimes it's just like literally a PCB with no electronics and just a meme on it. So like when you go to these bigger conferences, creating your own badge is often seen as a badge of honor, if you will.
Right.
Where if you go in with just something, even if it kind of sucks, if you bring something, you're accepted as a member of the community and you're kind of treated as though, you get it and you've done something special. So people take that to extreme limits depending on their level of skill. Some of these are like professional electronics teams that will just take some time off to make a product that's basically as good as a commercial product. And some of these are people that are famous like Andexor who continually make things like the Bender badge and other things that irritate like companies who are protective of their copyrights and necessitate these badges to be sold in elevators and such. So sometimes these are made by actual, villages, like the Crypto Privacy Village has a fantastic badge with lots of secrets you can unlock. And this is the effort of a semi-regular team of people who are at DEF CON, like producing these every time. And sometimes these are just made by individuals who are super passionate about these badges. So I wanted to go through and show you some of the badges that were at DEF CON because after Jonathan basically allowed us to take a look at all these, I just want people to know the kind of things they can do to fit into the hacker community. So I'm going to switch over to my screen, and these are some of the pictures from my first DEF CON experience. And you can see the first one I mentioned that really got people's imaginations firing was this badge that's actually a quadcopter. So it's actually possible to find a badge that is a functional flying quadcopter or a rolling robot or something that just hacks other badges. Some of my other favorite badges are, this is the controller for the quadcopter. So if you have these two badges, you can have one person with the controller, the other person with the quadcopter. We have, this is probably my favorite. And this is just probably like $1 worth of PCB. So this is the crypto privacy village badge. You can see it's really cool. If you flip it over, it's got cool ciphers on it, and these keys unlock additional things that the badge can do. It has a screen and a knob you can use to like scroll around and click on things. So if you're interested in cryptography, then this badge allows you to actually like explore that. Some of these badges, this one's 3D printed. This was for DEF CON 25. Nice. This is a Evil Cloud badge. Not totally sure what this does when it's soldered up. Mr. Robot badge, super popular, super copyright infringy. This is a pufferfish badge, really cool. It was based on the ESP32, very popular that year. No idea what it does. This is the official laser cut DEF CON badge for hackers. It has the rules of DEF CON. I think it's 4 times a day. Eat times 4 times a day, 3 hours of sleep, 2 meals, 1 shower, 0 rest, something. Oh, right. Sorry. You're supposed to use deodorant 4 times a day, 3 hours of sleep, 2 meals, 1 shower, 0 rest. That's the goals for DEF CON.
Pretty good advice.
Right?
Pretty good advice.
Yes. So this one is a Geiger counter.
Ooh.
It literally detects radiation. We held up various objects in front of it, and it was able to start detecting things that had any sort of radiation coming out of them. Super cool. Very active in front of smoke detectors. We have some, this is for the Hack West conference. So they actually like made their own badge. You'll find that a lot of these DEF CON groups, like DC 801, you'll have local DEF CON groups everywhere that come to DEF CON and organize things for the main event. So if you're looking for a community, oh my God, sorry, I love this hat. But if you're looking for a community of people that will help you get started with something like this, like one of these famous Bender badges, for example, this is one of the really highly sought after ones that actually secretly does a bunch of interesting stuff like hacking other badges and creating botnets. There's a lot of intrigue and a lot of cool stuff around these badges. And of course, there's other cultural things like the tinfoil hat contest, where your tinfoil hat is judged not just by style, but actually it's put into a device that measures how many electromagnetic waves it's actually blocking. So there's a person who wins for the best style contest, and last year it was a lady who created a tinfoil hat that was an exact replica of the James Webb Space Telescope. And there was also someone who just created like a really intense like foil enclosure that was able to block out all radio waves. So lots of great culture-based things at DEF CON. You can see you can get a microchip injected into your hand in the village where you can start to open doors and stuff with it. And of course, if you want to go around and learn about all the new hacking tools that are out there, they have these quick demos where you can learn that too. So I didn't have these pictures to pull up last time because I got signed out of my Google account while we were presenting. But you can see this is my friend Shota, who is showing off Shinobot. So Shota Shinogi is a Japanese hacker who created a ransomware simulator that's really cool.
Nice.
And I met him actually at DEF CON when he was presenting his tool. This is a really cool hacking tool that basically allows you to use a Raspberry Pi to send messages completely out of band, so you can exfiltrate data and no one will be able to detect it. I found tons of great stuff here. So just wrapping up the last conference, why you might want to go to a big conference and actually drop the money necessary to show up. Well, I mean, look at how fun this looks. Lots of great times, lots of interesting people, lots of stickers. To me, this is the definition of a good time. So that's it for, sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, you know what, thinking about this, we probably should touch on virtual conferences then, but you know what, maybe we're going to start a thing here. Maybe this is going to be the launch of our virtual conference badge. We'll put up some homemade printed circuit boards or some circuit designs. Maybe we'll get the audience involved, see if anybody can come up with some cool ideas. Maybe you can make a Wi-Fi hacking badge.
That would be
and
cool.
We can do a couple videos on the whole process, maybe. Maybe I'm getting too ambitious. I don't know.
No. Actually, in a previous one of our streams, we've actually designed a printed circuit board on the
Nice.
stream before. So for creating a really simple badge, something like that, it's actually not that difficult. And I actually, fortunately, have friends that can do that for me because I haven't
Very
created
cool.
a circuit board myself, yet 2 different teams I've been on have. So both my friend Alex, Lynn, and Stefan might be able to help with that.
Ooh, that sounds like a pretty good idea. I'd have to brush up. I think the last time I breadboarded anything or worked with circuit design was probably 20 years ago.
Yeah,
So-
I've managed to stay connected to this community just because of how insistent they are in kind of pushing the envelope and including me on their projects, but it's been a while for me too. I have to say, I think this was Jonathan's last badge, another Florida Man badge. You can tell because it's got an alligator on it and
Yep.
just a D1 mini soldered to the front of it. So if Jonathan, if you're in the stream, thank you for showing me all these badges and stuff. It's been a wild adventure learning about what they mean and the various groups that create them. Because I think you could also see there were some brands like Hacker Warehouses, just they just sell hardware. A lot of different people all bring this, both companies, small communities, computer science groups. Like, it's really incredible. So okay, let's drop the big difference, which this picture is taken from a very different kind of conference. So you can see that this doesn't look so crazy. It's like a relatively
Right.
smaller group of people. I'm up there presenting, so obviously it can't be that big. And in the background, you can see there's a couple more tables set up, but this kind of setting is much more intimate. This is much more being able to sit down and talk to someone one-on-one. In this case, we set up the Chicken Man game, which was a game where people were able to compete against each other to see who could hack as the most amount of Wi-Fi networks first. So we basically sat behind them, showed them how to hack a Wi-Fi network, and then let them go and compete against each other. And we got a lot of really great feedback from this. So for me, as a person who hadn't done an event at a conference before, it would have been very intimidating to do this at DEF CON.
Right.
This was the Layer 1 conference located in Los Angeles. It was run by some friends of ours who invited us via the local hackerspace. And for us, this was a really great way to try out, just getting in front of the kind of people we wanted to show this game to and getting their feedback without being absolutely overwhelmed by people
Right.
who had just spent, however many $100 on a ticket, who were really kind of
Right.
demanding a polished experience. So
So let me ask you that. What's the benefit in your eyes of going to a smaller show or an event versus a larger event like DEF CON or even a corporate event?
right. So at DEF CON, there's going to be DEF CON groups like, DEF CON Group 801 from the last badge that we showed that are going to be working tirelessly over the year to produce events and make sure that things go smoothly and are organized on the day of the conferences because, everyone has to travel, everyone has to
Right.
get all this stuff ready. There's a lot of pressure on these people. So it's much more difficult to be recognized or otherwise just kind of sit down and like get your questions answered at one of these, because it almost kind of looks like a carnival. People are like churning
Right.
out events and getting people engaged, and it's really very well planned. So if you're looking to just, sit down and learn something about hacking, or maybe get your own project in front of people and get feedback on it before it's expected to be completely finished, you can go to one of these local
Right.
conferences and you can get FaceTime with experts who live in your community, who are actually nearby. And you can actually start to connect with people who aren't going to go home to, Iowa or some faraway place where you're never going to get to talk to them again. And maybe it's the beginning of a friendship that allows you to work
Yeah.
on a really cool project. Or it could be a local company that's looking for someone just like you who happens to see your project, thinks it's great, and either wants to maybe sponsor you or even just directly hire you. There's a
Yeah.
lot of really great job development and educational things that happen locally that are in your community that don't require you to travel. And I would say the drastically reduced amount of money it takes to go to an event in your local area, that alone is a good way and a good reason to get started checking out these events and seeing if they're worth it. Because just the investment, you're not getting a hotel,
Right.
you're not getting a flight, you're not renting a car or whatever. There's a lot less, I guess, upfront cost for checking these out. And especially if you're willing to be involved in some of your local hacker spaces or local InfoSec groups, there's often a lot of cross-pollination with the people who put on these events and conferences and your local organized hacker groups. So if you go to these local hacker groups, you probably are not going to pay to get into
Right.
these conferences if you just start getting to know people. And I find that to be really valuable because once you meet a couple like movers and shakers in your local hacking community, you'll start to realize there's a lot more out there than you thought. And these people can introduce you to a lot more things in your local area you might not have really understood were open or available. And by that I mean hacker spaces with resources that allow you to work on cool projects or that are running classes that maybe have something you've always wanted to learn. It could be a business that's looking for people to intern or use their equipment in exchange for press or PR. Like we had a makerspace in Pasadena that was willing to open their doors to host classes and stuff that we didn't even know about, that we only learned from the fact that they hosted a big hacker conference our friends were involved in. So these sorts of local connections are great.
That's actually a great point, Kody. For some of our audience looking to get into this, how do you find out about these hackerspaces, or how do you find out about these local events? Where would they go and look for some of this stuff?
So I'm going to go ahead and drop this big link on my screen. And this is a great place to start. But I would say if you don't know anything about hacking and you don't want to do online research, which of course I'm going to recommend based on some of the names that I drop as we go through this list, then local hackerspaces and local makerspaces tend to have people that are highly involved in the local hacking community and know about both regional and national or kind of like really big conferences.
Right.
So asking those people is like, hey, I've been to DEF CON, or hey, I want to go to DEF CON, but I haven't quite made it. Do you know anywhere in my local area that has something like that? Is there a B-Sides group? Is there a DEF CON local group? Those are the kinds of people that will, once you find them, let you know everything that's going on and give you the opportunity to participate, which sometimes means you don't have to pay. For me, it was a huge opportunity as a member of a small computer science club at a local community college to be able to basically present something we've been working on for the last 6 months and get tons of industry and community feedback on this project that previously had only been displayed to other community college students. So for us to get a platform to just show off and potentially get people who wanted to use what we built and also have it spread further, like that was a really great way of getting introduced to people who then took us to the next conference and the next conference and also didn't require us to pay. So like a lot of it really is a financial thing for some people. It's like, you know, if you're going to take some days off of work or days off of your weekend and you're going to go to this and it also costs a couple $100, like you're kind of under pressure to get something out of it. I mean, if you just go and have a bad time, like you feel pretty bad, like just having to spend a couple $100. But you know, if at a minimum you were part of a really cool project or putting on a really cool production, or you were part of participating in the conference rather than just going to it, I feel like that's where if you come out with some contacts you can lean on in the future to find new great events. If you come out with some friends, like that's where the cost is worth it. Or if the cost is negated by, you know, doing a more participation based route like volunteering or exhibiting, don't be shy. If you have something that's just, you know, some spaghetti code that you really like, that you think is cool, these local conferences are an opportunity to get feedback on it. And not everyone is going to be rude. There's a lot of people who are, you know, maybe 2 steps behind you who are amazed by what you did, or a couple steps ahead of you that can give you some advice on how to take this and run with it if that's what you want to do. So those sorts of connections are really the benefit of these local conferences, because if you have something that you're too, you know, you're just not ready for the whole world to see because it's not done. Seriously, no matter what your industry is, no matter what your project is, you'll probably find someone who thinks it's cool at one of these conferences, and that's really what they're for.
So that makes me think. We talked a lot about it last time. We're talking about it now. The culture is a really big part of these. How does the culture differ between the smaller events versus the larger events? Is there something aside from just maybe getting your toe in that you'd want to go to a smaller event or a larger event for, in terms of getting into the culture, or getting introduced to a new culture?
Well,
within the community, that is.
Yeah, so I would say who you are is going to reflect on what you're interested in the InfoSec community. For example, if you're interested in the more kind of almost like black hat like groups, then the B-Sides community runs a really, really good, really active, and sometimes technical series of events that are satellites of any major event that are also highly local. So in any regional area, you'll usually find B-Sides groups running high quality events that are for professionals or for people who are, you know, a little technical that want to learn some new stuff. They tend to be a little bit more dressed down than like RSA, but maybe a little bit more dressed up than some of these like very, very local conferences.
Right.
So like there is a middle ground in terms of like, are you doing this for business? Are you doing this to make new friends? For the local conferences that are very local, you'll find that, you know, you're going to start running into the same people, and that can be a good thing, because if they're highly involved in your local area, then the local conferences that aren't as dressed up and maybe aren't as like franchised are going to be flavorful, I guess I would say. Like if you go to Wild West Hackin' Fest, like out in the middle of the desert and whatever, that's going to be a very different, very lively experience compared to maybe just going to like a B-Sides event that's a satellite of another event. So like Black Hat or DEF CON. So there, or RSA. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say like it kind of depends on what you want to get out of it. If you want to get business connections, brush up on the latest tech, learn about new software, and kind of have a Black Hat experience, look for DEF CON groups. Look for, well, maybe look more for B-sides groups. And then also, if you want to be more hyper local involved in community events, then DEF CON groups and local hacker spaces, and then these smaller conferences like Wild West Hack and Fest and stuff like that are really good for that. And I want to call out a couple that I haven't been to, but like ShmooCon, I know my occasional co-star Michael is has been to ShmooCon and liked it. There's a lot of different B-sides events that I have. Let me actually go to the list so you can see it too. So we have a lot of different B-sides events. There's DEF CON China, which is not as big as the main DEF CON, but I hear a lot of great things about it. I would not go to China to attend it, but that's still interesting. So there is Layer 1, where we've called that out a couple times, but we really like the people that run Layer 1. They're a lot of fun, and it's a great conference to check out in LA. HushCon, heard good things about it. Circle City Con, heard good things about it. Blue Team Con, if you are a Blue Team person and you want the experience of the Blue Team Village from DEF CON, outside of DEF CON. Hope Conference, I actually got to present at Hope Conference for the first time. That's in New York. It's been around for a super long time. I've heard about this from a lot of like old school hackers who like you know have been around forever, that they love HopeCon. I really enjoyed it. I found the crowd to be really, really cool. I didn't get to go to New York for HopeCon because it was virtual this time, but hopefully next year. Besides,
well, let me know. I think the last time I was at a Hope was probably about 10 or 12 years ago at
really?
this point.
Ooh.
Yeah. That was, I think it was my first and only time there, and it was, it's one of those things that I've heard about forever and ever and ever, and I finally went there, and then it just never worked out with my schedule again.
How was it? Was it fun?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. It was, like I said, I've been around for a long time, and I've heard about it, and I had a lot of friends that went in college and before that, and it just never worked out, but I had a great time, and I always wanted to go back, but I think it's or at least at the time was every 2 years or something like that it was held, or is that still the case?
I think it's every year now, but there was a period of time
is?
when it was less. Less.
Yeah, I think it was every 2 years, and then it just always worked out that when it was, I just didn't happen to be around, and then started working professionally, and it's a lot harder to sneak away if you're not working the event,
right?
To go and learn. So at least that's why I like the bigger conferences, is I can work, but I still get an opportunity to go and learn while I'm there.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of these are problematic. Again, if you're working all the time or if you're working a lot, then taking the time to go away and like be at some of these conferences where some of the juiciest stuff is offered during the work week, they're kind of assuming that your job is going to let you go do that. But a lot of people don't have jobs where that's something they can write off if it's not something that directly relates back to their training, or they're not doing an event there. I know I went to C3 and found out that because I wasn't actually presenting there, then I was kind of on my own for that. So a lot of people would probably find themselves in the same circumstance. And it can drive some people away from wanting to travel to one of these conferences that are more local. I mean, if you're in the New York area, then if it's just a drive away, sure, why not go? But if I'm flying from across the country and I've got other work I should be doing and I'm not actually presenting there or something, then it can be a much harder choice for some of these conferences.
So in terms of the ones that we cover, maybe you have one coming up. Is there one of these smaller events, aside from Hope that we talked about, that you would travel to go attend, that maybe you've attended before, you've always wanted to attend, that you're going to hop on that plane and fly out and go to?
Yes, there definitely is. Yeah. So for me, it's going to be the C3 camp. So the C3 conference has a number of different regional things, just like DEF CON has DEF CON groups. The Computer Chaos Congress has a bunch of different hacker spaces and hacker groups that are all affiliated with them, and they're kind of like the main organization in Germany that has kind of like a structured, organized, like franchise group of like hacker spaces. Of course, they're all like independent, but they kind of fly the same flag. And these all get together, and there's some particular ones that host the C3 camp. The C3 camp is incredible. It's a literal camp, so you're out camping, like learning about technology, and last time they basically created this incredible MicroPython device that it was completely programmable. It was like a smart device. It was a wearable smart device that had all these sensors, that had like a heartbeat sensor and all this other like really cool stuff that they taught the students how to write apps for. So by the end of this camp, the students not only had built this device and had it working, but they also had written their own applications for it and basically been hacking it for like an entire week. And the sheer variety of things that they created for it was just incredible. They created, networking between the devices. They made it so that you could exchange things. And I don't know, I was just so blown away by the culture that grew out of it. These people really bonded by like having these incredible like open source hardware devices to just play with and design challenges around, design games. It was a really, I think, beautiful way of using technology to facilitate human connections. And I've just heard incredible things about the C3 camp. So if I could make it to C3 camp, I would love to do it. It, like Hope, is not held every year. I believe it's not held this year. Probably wouldn't have been anyway, just because of the circumstances. But if you miss it one year, you usually have to wait a year, like an extra year before doing it again. So just the rarity and the fact that it's such an incredible thing, and the fact that when I was in Munich, I got to see this Munich Hackerspace, which has the C3 hacker group there. They showed me the devices they created. They even gave me one, and I was like blown away by it. I'd never seen a wearable like that was like open source, hackable, and worked with MicroPython. So for beginners who know a little bit of Python, to just be able to do that in a week, like, sign me up. That sounds amazing. All right.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, all right. So some of these other ones, so we have B-Sides Las Vegas. B-Sides is gonna, how do I explain B-Sides? So I have only very briefly been to B-Sides events. They were satellites of RSA events, I believe. So like they were kind of like dressed up and fancy there, but B-Sides are kind of like an echo of like whatever event's going on, where like there will be a community kind of more local based event, like Las Vegas based event, that is organized well and kind of like branches off from some of these other conferences, and they typically go later than these other conferences. So they'll have like later night events, they'll have like parties, stuff like that, which is actually really fun and cool to go to if you want to like unwind at the end of the day. So I really recommend like checking out B-Sides events if you're going to a really big conference. If it's just a little bit overwhelming and you want something a bit smaller, I find that a lot of people really like the B-Sides event, and I've heard good things about them in general. So I would definitely check them out. ThoughtCon, heard good things about it, never been. And I also, like, these all have locations. So if you're in one of these places, if you're in Taiwan, VXCon actually looks pretty cool. And I've gone through and I've eliminated any of these that don't have a website or, haven't had a conference since like 2018. Besides Denver, you'll see a lot of these local ones. Wild West Hack and Fest. Okay, I've mentioned this.
Every time you say that, it cracks me up. I don't know why.
Because it's great.
I feel like if we're going to talk about this, I should find a cowboy hat.
Yeah, so like, so they started in Deadwood, which I believe was a pretty small town.
I've been, and it is, yes.
So I think that it eventually got big enough that they needed to move it, and now it's in San Diego. Little sad. But that's the thing. Some of these conferences keep themselves artificially small, and Michael was telling me about this today, because they want to preserve that community feel. They don't want people coming from all over the country and like making it a huge conference, because for one, sometimes they pick places that aren't able to accommodate that many people. And for two, so it actually strains the local infrastructure. And for two, like sometimes it just brings in drama and other stuff that you don't want at conferences that are otherwise intimate and fun and simple. So some of these you'll just find a totally different culture that's very unique, and it's not tied to any other conference. It's kind of influenced by its own group of people, and that can be a huge benefit for people that don't want something that's so homogenous. They want something that's really unique, and it's more niche and maybe a little cowboy. You want to dress up a little bit. But yeah, I know a lot of people that are involved in Wild West Hack and Fest. I think it's fun. It's great.
Have you been to that one or
I
no?
I haven't. I meant to go when we talked about doing it, and I kind of virtually attended it by, just like watching everything I could, like while it was going on. But I just noticed that a lot of people seem to have a lot of fun with it. RootCon, I've heard things about this. It's hosted in the Philippines. It seems to be pretty well organized. ShellCon, I could talk about ShellCon a lot. So ShellCon's in San Pedro, which is right next to Long Beach, California. Our friend Ian is a security researcher who started as a writer at Nullbyte and ended up presenting at ShellCon, which was my first time there. And I really like ShellCon because they have a great focus on community engagement and career engagement. So they have like the Raise Me Village, which is a track for basically career advice. And they kind of anticipate that a lot of people that are coming into this conference are going to be completely new. They might not have a technical background, and they really want to connect you with people who could hire you or give you the technical training skills you need to get hired. So it's a training event. It's a education event. It's a jobs event. Some of these, like for example, Southern California Linux Conference, is that even on Scale? So sorry, I should mention Scale. So Scale's in Pasadena. Southern California Linux Expo. They just have like a big whiteboard of people that are looking for all sorts of jobs, and it's great because if you want to just cruise by, take a picture of it, and apply to the ones that are interesting to you, it's a really good way to just find jobs in your area that are hiring for people like you. But if you want a much more hands-on experience, that's where things like the Raise Me Village at ShellCon are kind of, in my opinion, a better way of finding out about cybersecurity jobs than just taking a picture of a whiteboard. Like that's nice, but like if you're able to sit down and like do some career training, do some career development stuff from actual professionals who are donating their time, that's really excellent. And I think that that's the value of coming to some of these conferences where you're able to sit down with someone in your local community hiring for cybersecurity jobs who will look at your resume, maybe tell you some advice like for free. Like that's a big deal. If you're wondering why your resume is getting rejected and maybe you're new to cybersecurity and you wish someone would give you that sort of advice. So I think ShellCon if you're in the Southern California area and you're able to travel, I really enjoyed ShellCon along with Layer 1. I think those are probably two of my conference picks for the LA area. I found those to be, along with Scale, really good ways of getting to know people in the local area and also just getting to know companies that are hiring and what's necessary to get hired. Going back to the list, besides DC, heard good things about SaintCon. So that's in Provo, Utah. Don't know a lot of stuff happening in Provo, Utah. So if you're there, then maybe check out SaintCon. But yeah, so a lot looks like it's still active. Besides Scotland, Vienna, Portland, London, and Seattle. So if you're in any of those, I see that Brazil also has a really good hacker community, and I know that a lot of people on Nullbyte that comment on the videos there are from Brazil. So the H2HC conference I've heard is good in Brazil. Japan doesn't have a lot of hacking conferences, so I wanted to shout out Besides Tokyo and Code Blue. Shota, when I interviewed him about Japanese hacker culture, oh my god, like 4 years ago, was saying that it's not as big and as popular in Japan as it is in the United States and many other countries, just because breaking things and going against the grain maybe isn't as big of a deal in Japan.
That could be a good discussion to have. Maybe an interview or something like that to learn about some of the different cultures.
It's fascinating
for hackers. I'm curious. See, that makes sense. I've been to Japan a couple times, and it makes sense culturally. But I'd like to dig into that and maybe ask some questions. So that's another cool idea. Maybe the fans watching would like to see that too.
Yeah, because I would say I also went to a hackerspace in Norway, and I asked them about why are there not more hackers from Norway, and they're just like, well, we trust the government, and we trust we really have very high confidence in our authority figures and our public institutions. So it's whereas a lot of hackers are very mistrustful of the government and stuff, we generally agree with most of the stuff that they do. And we at the risk of sounding a little naive, is not a lot of bad stuff has happened here. And because of that, we're just not as interested in some of the breaking stuff and going against whatever. It's that kind of flying in the face of authority. Here, people are like, why? It was just a very as an American where we're just rebel. It's there's very this kind of undergrain of just we don't take stuff from no one. Whereas in Norway, they're just no, our public officials pretty much have stuff under control. We think they're doing good. So there kind of was a lack of cynicism about oversight and things like that. Where it's well, why would you want to have oversight over these institutions? They seem like they're doing a good job. It's well, ours needed to be over. Someone needs to be looking over their shoulder on our end. But if you guys are fine, I guess. So yeah, hackers from different cultures have different biases based on the way their culture addresses authority, the way their culture addresses breaking things or doing something you're not supposed to do. And in Japan, Shota was telling me, that's kind of discouraged. So you'll notice that there's a lot fewer hacker conferences in some of these areas, and then there's a lot more in some of the other ones. For some reason, I noticed there seems to be a good amount of hacker conferences in Singapore, or not Singapore, sorry, Taiwan. So who knows why? But yeah, if you guys are interested, we could probably bring in some of our international friends and just talk about the differences in hacker culture in places like Japan or some other regions. Because I think Shota is actually now working in Taiwan, because he said the hacker community in Japan wasn't really enough even to sustain the work he was doing. So he moved to Taiwan because there's a really good community there. Or no, sorry, he's in Singapore. So there's a really good hacker community there as well. So there are really good hacker communities in just random countries you might not know about, and looking at these hacker conferences might be a good way to start finding out about massive hacker communities that are just maybe not in your country.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I would travel for Code Blue Tokyo, but maybe. So TourCon, Heard a lot of good things about TourCon, San Diego, California. If you guys want to check that one out, I'll open that up. I have not personally been to TourCon, but I've thought about doing it. So if that means anything to you. Let's see. So, okay, we have Cactus Con, another great Western-themed... There's a lot of, like, Western or cowboy-themed conferences, so I hope that you guys are getting your kicks in for that, if that's what you're into. Cactus Con 2021, Mesa, Arizona. I used to live in Arizona. It's hot. It's very hot. It's very hot. It's very dry. Not sure if I'd go to Cactus Con, but it looks cool.
I'm just laughing at the Southwest cowboy theme conferences. I didn't know. I mean, I learned a lot about the culture on the last one. I'm learning a little bit more about the culture on this one. I didn't know that the cross section between cowboys and hacking.
They love it. It's weird. They love it. It is a big crossover. So of course they mentioned Chaos Communication Congress. That's huge. Yep. That's in Leipzig, Germany. Weird place, weird people, lots of fun. I had to mention this one just because of the name. This is Shaka Khan. And to me, that's hilarious because Shaka Khan is a person. But
it's true. Yeah.
Shaka Khan is in Honolulu, Hawaii. No idea if it's good or not, but I imagine Shaka Khan might be a little bit annoyed that they grabbed that Twitter handle. So hilarious.
So what you're saying is road trip to the Honolulu, Hawaii conference?
That sounds great to me. I mean, if someone pays for me to go to Shaka Khan, I'll go to Shaka Khan.
I'll go ahead and put in the expense report right now.
So I was going to mention Kauai Con, but I'm not because it's confusing. Because that sounds like it's hosted on Kauai when instead it's hosted in Wellington, New Zealand. I don't know anything about them. So instead I'm going to talk about KiwiCon because I do know about KiwiCon. I've always wanted to go to KiwiCon. I still want to go to KiwiCon. And you probably want to go to KiwiCon too. So KiwiCon is hosted in New Zealand. It is absolutely beautiful. The community of speakers there is super cool. And unfortunately, oh no, I don't see that they have one. Oh yeah, they're just pining for some Fjords. They didn't have one in 2019, and they're probably not going to have one in 2020 because of what's going on now. But if KiwiCon comes up again, highly recommend it. I've heard great things here. I know several people that have spoken at KiwiCon. All right, fine. What is KawaiiCon? I guess I'll bite. Okay. I don't know about this one.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have a date on it. So I'm gonna say for now, you probably can't even go to New Zealand. But for now, maybe check out KiwiCon. But I don't know about these other ones. So Derbycon, Louisville, Kentucky. Is Derbycon canceled? So Derbycon was a real good time. Derbycon had a reputation for being like, not like rowdy, but like just like fun. But it also had a reputation for attracting some drama. And I get the feeling that eventually the organizers just didn't really feel like it was worth it to continue putting up with all this nonsense in order to continue hosting this really great conference. So as you can see, it's not loading. And I imagine that's because the website's probably not up anymore. But the last Derbycon was, actually, I think it was last year. And did you go to Derbycon, Michael? Yeah, Michael went to Derbycon. So I didn't get to go to Derbycon. Michael went to Derbycon. He's not on the streams though, so he doesn't get to tell us about it. But Derbycon was a lot of fun. But it is one of those examples of how when these conferences get too big, sometimes the organizers just get overwhelmed, and it can cause the conference to die. So the legend of Derbycon in Louisville, Kentucky is a great cautionary tale for if you have a conference that's becoming popular and you just don't want to have it take over your entire life. I've heard it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, you can't go there anymore. But if you wonder why some of these conferences keep themselves a little bit smaller, then Derbycon is a good cautionary tale. Maybe look that up if you want to hear the whole story. Besides Rhode Island, I was just impressed that there's even anything on Rhode Island because it's so small. And then, of course, the smallest conference, the cutest conference, RSA, which, of course, is in San Francisco. And that one is marked as a security trade show, which is 100% accurate. I would call that a trade show. So Sparklecon, I've actually heard good things about Sparklecon. It's in Fullerton, California. If you want to check it out, I haven't actually made it myself, but I've virtually attended it. And by that, I mean, I've just watched a bunch of people attend it in person on Twitter. And aside from not having HTTPS enabled, it seems like they don't have a lot going on. So if Sparklecon's still happening, it has a good reputation. Not sure if they're still covering it, but This wasn't actually on the list, but I wanted to add it. So we did a podcast with Patrick Wardle from Objective C, and he has a conference called Objective by the Sea, which is located in Hawaii, and it is, as far as I know, one of the only Mac security conferences that focuses exclusively on Mac OS. And Patrick Wardle's a former NSA security guy, so he used to break Mac OS computers for the NSA, and as a result, he's extremely good at it. So when he organizes a conference, it tends to, attract some attention because usually there's people that are highly skilled who are contributing really amazing things to it. And if you guys are interested in going to not only a really beautiful place, maybe you live in Hawaii, or if you have some excuse to go there, or maybe your work will pay for you to go to a Mac security conference, then I highly recommend checking out Objective by the Sea. Patrick is, I consider him a friend. He's always been there to explain things or help out when I'm covering his work. So he's very, very accessible, and his research is frankly just incredible because he's always finding new like state-sponsored malware for macOS systems. So great expert, great conference. Again, we have not made it because Hawaii is far and it's kind of difficult to get the time off, but I've kind of virtually attended, and it seems really, really cool.
So that maybe this is a good time to segue with all these virtual conferences and what's going on with the world now. How do you see the virtual conferences? Well, I guess have you been to some recent virtual conferences now that they've switched them over?
Yes. So I attended and both attended and presented at Hope. And I would say that for one, I was honored to present at Hope, and I love them. They're great. And for two, I would say that it is quite difficult to run a conference virtually when everybody's using software for the first time, and a lot of volunteers are working that have never worked with this stuff before.
Right.
Just because you're a great conference organizer doesn't mean that you know how to run remote conferencing software on an enterprise level, which is essentially what these conferences are demanding. So I found that while I was able to prepare and do whatever else, it was really tricky to get everything working the way it was supposed to work, just because a lot of people were working with new software, a lot of people were working with systems they didn't really have a lot of experience with, and then even if there was a core group of experts who understood how everything worked, they had to transfer that knowledge to all of the volunteers who were running the conference, and sometimes there was a little bit of miscommunication. So I've been promised a lot of beers if I ever go to New York. But overall, I found that once we got through the kinks, it was great to be able to network with people, but you have to have a follow-up. You're not going to have that side conversation. You're not going to go out for some party later and run into the same people and spark up a friendship. You really need to have a way for people to either follow up with you or a place for people to catch you later, because there's not that lobby. You lose the ability to talk to people afterwards unless you put energy into that. For me that's shouting out my Twitter as much as possible, letting them know about the Discord community that we created for people who were taking our workshops and for people who wanted to just stay in touch after the conference. It was making sure that all the people that found us that wanted to stay with us for the rest of the year were able to do so, because we lost a lot of the culture exchange that we get in the conference. It's informal. That's just because I always interpret the badges as performance art. They're designed to force you to interact with fellow attendees. They're designed to make you break down your social barriers and learn about other people, even if that's maybe something you're not comfortable doing. And there was none of that, unfortunately, which really for me made the conferences feel a lot more distant and a lot more cold. I think in the future, we're going to see good conferences find ways to engage people directly so that you can meet and work with other attendees to achieve unlocking the badge or doing a CTF challenge or something else that's makes people buzz. Because the thing about these conferences is DEF CON or some of these other ones that have unique and cool badges or things to unlock, there's buzz, there's a challenge, there's something fun that people are trying to solve together. There's a way for people to collaborate. And these conferences have lost that in a way that makes it really imperative for them to gain it back again. So I think that in the future, as these conferences stay virtual and evolve, we're going to see really good ones find ways of getting people to work together, to make it feel so you're not alone, or you're not just sitting at your computer by yourself. You need to feel like you're a part of community, part of a bigger, almost like a bigger family of people that understand you a little bit, in order for these conferences to feel like they used to. And that's something I'm still kind of waiting for. I mean, I got a lot of ideas, but I haven't seen any of them executed well yet.
I absolutely agree. I've been through a couple virtual conferences now just since this started, and that's definitely what I miss most, is the camaraderie with the road crew on the corporate side. So shout out to the road crew who goes out to these shows, putting them together, organizing them. But you have a lot of team building just built in. You're all in together. You're all working for the same goal. You're, working the booth or standing for hours together. So you have that shared discomfort of standing on the hard floors for 8 or 10 hours, And then just being able to get the face time with, at least for me, for the customers, the prospects, just putting that face to a name and having that good conversation. You can never replace that experience where someone comes up, hey, tell me about what you're doing. And you end up getting into a great conversation about, what are their goals? What are they looking to do? What do they want to see at the conference? And that's the one thing I always ask everybody that walks up, like when I'm at the booth. I say, what's the coolest thing you've seen at the conference so far? Doesn't matter what conference. I want to know what's the thing that got them excited. And that always leads to a great discussion. I always get a lot out of it. And it's just great to learn about what different people prioritize, especially when they come to these larger events. So, and I miss that. I miss having that, just like you said, casual conversation.
Yeah. I think that DEF CON probably did a better job. Of course, they also didn't have very much time to prepare for this. So
yeah.
I didn't attend a lot of DEF CON just because I was exhausted from the Hope Conference and they were so close together, and also Black Hat, and it's just like the whole thing just kind of blended together. But I heard that a lot of people did have a pretty good experience at DEF CON, and they managed to turn their conference more virtual and more interactive than some of the other ones had. So I'm very excited to see what these conferences are doing, but honestly, I'm also tired. So, like sitting through an entire conference when there's people buzzing around you and places to be,
right.
and it's Las Vegas or some other place, or even, at layer one, if I'm able to ask someone, if I can do a talk or show something off or talk about the computer science club I have and ask if anyone wants to sponsor us, like, that's totally doable. I can network and I can make stuff happen. That's not really as easy to do here because people are flooded with messages. Everyone's remote. They don't know where I'm coming from when I'm asking them a question. I'm just not as able to use, I guess, some of my natural abilities to get people's attention by just like getting in front of them and being like, hi, you doing the thing. Like, what is this? How do I get involved in this? Like, it's harder to see who's in charge. It's harder to see like the clear way of talking to them. So I definitely miss that. And I hope that there are some ways that we can get people more engaged in these future conferences and also translate that into like a long-term engagement. So people are like hanging out with us the next live stream we do or the next workshop that we do.
I guess that's for me the pros and cons of the virtual conference. One, we don't have to travel, so you get a little bit of that time back. You can go to something that you might not have otherwise because of travel and time constraints. But on the other hand, like you mentioned, because you're not somewhere else, you still have regular life that you have to deal with. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to really focus on the experience, focus on what you're doing there. And avoid some of the distraction. And that's one of the reasons I also like to go to the conferences and I volunteer to go to the conferences is because it's a chance to focus on something different. It's a change of scenery, a change of pace, a different set of interaction with different folks, but I get to immerse myself in that experience. So I definitely miss that from the live perspective.
Yeah. I think this is a great time to start focusing in on local conferences. If you've got stuff going on in your area and you can attend it virtually, then this is probably a time when you would want to, find other people to network with in your area, find local resources, find things you can do in your area. Because if it's all the same, like, and you're not going to be able to like physically go to these places, then being able to follow up, locally is really like a much better advantage than meeting people all over the world who, throughout the rest of the year, you're going to have a much harder time either interacting with or working on projects with. So yeah, I would say now with everything being remote, local conferences are a lot less daunting to go to because, they're locally sourced. You're going to find a lot of people in your local area and you'll probably learn more about things happening in your local area that are specific to, those interests. So they, as we said, the hackers that are running, a conference in Japan might not be the same as the hackers in your local area. And if you want to maybe find people around you to work on other projects with, then it kind of makes more sense to go to the local conferences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that we covered, oh my God, like 80 different conferences.
We did. We covered a lot of ground here. Physically, we talked about all these different geographic places, but we've also covered a lot of different topics too. So hopefully that gives a lot of people some food for thought for these virtual conferences and for looking at the local events too.
Yeah, so if you guys want to check out this list, I will try to post it as well and make sure that all these are available. Again, a lot of these are like B-sides groups or DEF CON groups that are very local. So if you're in Rhode Island and you didn't know that there was, stuff going on in Rhode Island, hopefully we opened up some things for you today and you're able to see that. So I'll try to provide that link as best I can, and make sure that you guys have access to it. Yes, I think that that's a pretty good introduction to smaller conferences. And if you guys are interested in anything from career development to making local friends to finding local hacker groups to taking part in something like the C3 camp, where you're actually out there camping and working on technology, then all of this stuff is probably interesting to you because it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and it generally doesn't require very much travel unless, again, you really want to go into the West and put on some cowboy boots and a cowboy hat and learn to hack in the dust. Yeah. So, yeah, if you guys have any other conferences that we missed, please shout it out in the comments. I would love to hear about them. If you have any experience at these conferences you guys want to share, please also mention them because I'm always looking for new conferences to go to. If any of you organize conferences, let me go to your conference because it sounds like fun. And especially if you're part of KiwiCon or have some way to smuggle me into Hawaii, then I'm interested. But another thing I'll mention again is just like these larger conferences, if you want to go to one of these, but the cost is prohibitive, please reach out to them. They often need volunteers who do simple stuff, or they need people who, are just willing to do very simple things that will get you in for free or for a reduced cost. If you're part of a student group, they'll often work with you, and you can also be referred to companies, sometimes like Veronis, that might be willing to sponsor your entry in order to go to the vendor area or take part in some of the other things that are going on at the conference. There's lots of different ways to attend these local conferences, so don't be scared off by the price. Don't be scared off by, some of the other factors. It's really worth it to check them out, especially if you can get the fee waived. For me, I write and I also produce videos, so I'm often able to contact these people and say, hey, I'm press, and am I able to get some sort of discount? So there's lots of different angles you can try to work in order to get into these conferences for free, especially if maybe you have a YouTube channel or you have some like articles you do, or you write marketing stuff for cybersecurity. That could qualify you as press. A lot of these people just want other people to talk about their conference and know it exists. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can attend these without committing if you are reluctant to financially, and without having to travel if you don't want to invest or spend money on doing that. But nowadays, most of them are virtual anyway. So.
Kody, it sounds awfully like you're hacking the conference system here. So here we go.
I will say that every time I go to RSA, I register as press and I get some of the best food I get all year. So there may be a little bit of ulterior motives with going to some of these conferences. But yeah, I would say even if you're just on the periphery of the stuff, if you are someone considering a career move and you do press-like stuff, then checking out a security conference might be a great opportunity to actually get into one of these conferences for free and see if the security community is for you. So if you're a student, if you qualify, if you're a veteran, like maybe there's a discount you didn't know about. It never hurts to ask, and often these people are just happy that you want to attend their conference and they're willing to extend an extra ticket or refer you to someone who will. So don't give up. Check these things out if you're able to. And again, check for local DEF CON and B-sides groups in your area if you're looking for more of like an active series of events rather than some of these kind of pre-planned events that are every year. If you want to just take part in maybe monthly or bi-monthly events that have either featured speakers or people who are just contributing to various projects they're working on or their expertise. I used to be part of a Linux user group in Pasadena where some guy would just come in and tell us like probably classified stories about like national security stuff that had just happened. We were like, damn, like that makes me scared to use a computer. Okay. So like there's lots of great stuff out there that's available at the local level. And the gateway to this is often either checking out one of these local conferences or just getting in touch with the organizers. Cool. So hopefully you guys asked some good questions that we were able to answer in the chat. If you guys have any further questions, you want to know more about specific conferences, please let us know. And Killian, thank you for joining us today and going through some of these interesting conferences that most people probably haven't heard of.
This was really eye-opening for me too. So thanks for having me on again, Kody. I really appreciate it. Look forward to next time.
Yeah. So next time, Killian and I are going to be discussing Ghost in the Shell for 2 hours. So please tune in then. Well, I don't know. It's a work in progress. We'll see. You guys vote. But
it'll be longer than the actual movie, so
cool.
The original.
And if you guys like this and our other resources, Also, make sure to check out some of the other free resources Varonis offers. If you're interested in learning PowerShell and Active Directory, we have some really great courses that you can check out, such as the AD PowerShell course that teaches you how to do some super cool scripting in PowerShell for Active Directory that is normally a headache if you're an administrator of that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in taking advantage of those, go ahead and check them out on Varonis. They don't have very much Ghost in the Shell, just to warn you, but they are a really great resource. Yeah, and I guess we will see you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.